Welcome to Life Rebounding, and thank you for joining me as we continue to look at this study of the Lamb of God, and in particular, Priceless, the Lamb of God. And today we want to turn our attention on the appalling Lamb, and that may sound strange, but I'll explain it in a minute. The appalling Lamb, and that's based on Isaiah 52, verse 14, where we read, "Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness." Now there's some key words in there: appalled, disfigured, marred, and we'll come to those in a moment. But let me ask you a question. When you look at the moon at night, you see that big full moon, what do you see? Most of us in North America, when we look at the moon, we talk about seeing the man in the moon. You see the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and so on. But in other parts of the world, when they look at the moon, they see other things. Like Taiwan, for instance, where when they look at the moon, they see the rabbit. Now, we're both looking at the same moon, but we see different things. And I want you to think about that now as we think about the view that the Father had of the crucifixion of the Son, and how that view might be a little different from the view that we have, or that those who are gathered around the cross had as they looked at Jesus hanging on the cross. Now it's clear that there were many who were appalled at Jesus. The religious leaders of the day couldn't wait to hang him on a cross because he was a threat to them, both because of the beliefs that he was now inspiring people to believe, that clarified the Old Testament, but it didn't fit with their understanding of the Old Testament, with their understanding of the Scriptures. And so he was a threat to them in many different ways. And they couldn't wait to get rid of him. They were truly appalled at him. But you know what? There's a lot of people today that are equally appalled at Jesus because their beliefs don't line up with his, and they can't get him to conform with their values or their way of life or whatever the case may be. So being appalled at Jesus is not something new, but that's one of the descriptive words that's used here in reference to how Isaiah saw this before it ever happened. That people would look at him and they would be appalled, and they would look and they would see him as disfigured. And certainly there was a disfigurement of Jesus, a spear in the side, nails in hands and feet that hung him on a cross, where he was impaled, essentially, and as disfigured to the point where you didn't die from the nails that held you to the cross. You died basically because you couldn't breathe. And the tortured form of a body on the cross to this day is still one of the worst forms of punishment that a person could ever endure. And so he was disfigured, and his image was marred, and that's where the perspective from the Father comes in from, as I think about it. Think about the difference that the Father saw. Think about the Father who knew the Son in heaven, in glory, in perfection. And then think about how he saw him then hanging on the cross. How heartbreaking it must have been for the Father to see such a difference. And yet that was the image that was marred. And not only was the image marred in that way, but I think you can make the case that as the Father looks at the Son on the cross, he sees there the image of humanity, a humanity that was made in the image of God, and how much that has been marred by sin. And it's all hanging there on the Son on the cross. As predicted, the Lamb of God would be a stumbling block for many people. It was in Jesus' time and is still today. Can I give you this invitation? Don't be appalled at the suffering servant, the Lamb of God, but be amazed. Be amazed that there was one who had such a deep love that he was willing to endure all that he did simply because he loved you and wanted you to be reconciled to the Father. Won't you be astonished today with him? Won't you be amazed at him? And won't you humbly bow and give him the worship that is rightfully due? He is the appalling Lamb, the stumbling block, but he is the one who is an amazing Lamb just as well.